Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. I want to welcome you to this special edition of Focus on Liberia, where we're going to be discussing law enforcement in Liberia. We're going to delve into this topic. My guest is Mr. Alfred Johnson. Alfred, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. By the way, Alfred is a 2024 graduate of E. Jonathan Goodrich High School in Bannersville, that's in my neighborhood. He received his associate degree in criminal justice from the Northampton Community College in Pennsylvania. He got his BSc and master's in criminal justice from Westchester University, also in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And he got another master from the American University in Washington, D.C. in public administration. Above all, Mr. Johnson is a 7-year officer with the Prince George County Police Department in Maryland. He holds the rank of a corporal. He works or he's assigned with the detective or as a detective with the Regional Investigation Division in Liberia, that's CID man. Mr. Johnson, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dennis. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to everyone in Radio Land for tuning in. And we hope we have a wonderful show. Just to quickly say, as you said, I'm a 2003-2004 graduate of Everett Jonathan Goodrich Memorial High School. I left Liberia in 2006 July. I immigrated to the United States. As you rightly stated, I got my associate from Northampton, my bachelor's and my first master's in criminal justice from Westchester University. I got my second master's in public policy from American University in Washington, D.C., public administration and policy. I then enrolled at the Prince George County Police Department Academy. I was accepted in March of 2014. I graduated from the academy in October of 2014, thereby becoming a police officer. Currently, I hold the rank of corporal, and my current assignment is I'm a detective with the Regional Investigation Division, where I investigate attempted murders, residential breaking and entering, residential and commercial breaking and entering. I'm also a regular commentator with Prime FM and so occasionally OKFM. Let me just make this disclaimer. I am speaking in my capacity as a criminal justice practitioner and a law enforcement officer and not as a member of the Prince George County Police Department. So whatever view I express here are that of mine and mine only and do not reflect the views of the Prince George County Police Department.
Thank you there for that disclaimer. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this special edition of Focus on Liberia. We are discussing law enforcement in Liberia. Mr. Johnson is a law enforcement officer here in the United States and also a criminal justice practitioner. He's heavily involved. He follows issues in Liberia. He's most of the time on the radio talking these same issues. And so we reached out to him to come and share his knowledge. So we're going to start by, talking about first definition of terms. He's a law enforcement officer. He studied criminal justice. He's in the police. So we want to see what all these things mean. So, Mr. Johnson, what is law enforcement?
Well, again, Dennis, thank you. Law enforcement is a section of the criminal justice system. It's a component of the entire criminal justice system, and the system law enforcement is a body that there's an organized body intended to deter criminal activities through enforcement and through various means, and ensuring that the rule of law is adequately enforced and also to prevent crime. So law enforcement is just a component of the entire criminal justice system.
And when you say criminal justice system, meaning there's other justice system, what would that be?
I mean, as far as organization is concerned, the criminal justice system is the premier system for the administration of justice and the insurance of the rule of law and the orderly function of society. Now, we can say there are other forms of justice administration, maybe on the traditional level and all that, but the primary source of law enforcement and the primary source of running an orderly society is the criminal justice system.
So is law enforcement the same as policing? Or what's the difference?
So the criminal justice system comprises of various components. They are law enforcement, prosecution, courts, and corrections. And there are components of the criminal justice system, and they are probation and parole. Now, probation and parole can fall either under the court system or under correction, depending on the jurisdiction. Law enforcement is one of the components of criminal justice system, and law enforcement includes policing, it includes immigration, it includes any component of any component of the law enforcement community that has to do with enforcement of laws. So the immigration is considered law enforcement. Border Patrol is considered law enforcement. The SSA is also considered law enforcement. EPS is considered law enforcement. Every component that has to do with enforcement of law and keeping the peace is considered law enforcement. It has some sort of enforcement power and tool that has the ability to take away life, in a sense, is considered law enforcement.
And the key word in law enforcement there is the law, right?
Yes.
So in case of law enforcement, the key word, as I said, is the law. So meaning you have to enforce the law. What if the laws are weak or people are not respecting the law? What's the role of law enforcement in that area? Or if law enforcement officers themselves are not observing the law? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a technical issue there. We're going to have our guest back shortly, but this is focused on Liberia. My guest here is Mr. Alfred Johnson, and we are discussing the criminal justice or the law enforcement in Liberia. And discussing law enforcement, we're going to also look at some case studies. We're going to look at discussing law enforcement in Liberia. We're going to look at some law enforcement issues that have been happening. For instance, we had the reported suicide of an EPS officer during the president's nationwide tour. We're going to talk about that as a case study or something we can talk about as part of law enforcement. All right, we have Mr. Johnson is back. Apart from that, we also going to talk about, as a case study, the election day incidents in Bapolu involving the country devil. Country devil was somehow, as I learned, taking part in law enforcement. We're going to look at that case. There has also been multiple SGBV cases and arrests in Liberia. Sometimes we don't know what happened next. We're going to talk about that as a case study when we talk about law enforcement in Liberia. Last but not the least, there are people sometimes, if they are in trouble with the law, they escape, right? Example, so we say the underground escape routes of those who found themselves in trouble with the law. Example, we have the incident involving Madam Ellen Cochran, who escaped from the country, and also Henry Pedro Custer. So this is the time we'll be talking about kind of border security law enforcement from that standpoint. So welcome back, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm sorry for the interruption.
That's fine. These things happen. Technology doesn't behave well all the time. So let's look at Liberia and look at different areas of law enforcement. I was born in the interior where the custom officer, how do you call them, forestry people, everybody is law enforcement. So give me some examples of law enforcement people in Liberia.
Okay,
with the custom officers and also the forestry development FDA people be part of that?
In a sense, yes. If those agencies have enforcement, like for example, like the custom authority has enforcement because it's about collection, so they're supposed to have law enforcement power. Forestry can have their own police if they feel the need. Like in America, the United States Postal Service has a postal police. The United States Postal Service has postal police that have enforcement power. So if the forestry department or whatever it is in Liberia feels the need to have law enforcement, they can go through the regular channel to obtain a law enforcement body that will enforce forestry laws. So forestry laws, in terms of they can have a park police. Forestry, maybe they control parks, so they can have park police that enforce park laws that are in parks and all these things. So it depends on the body of government and if they want to get law enforcement or not. Even the national legislature can have their own law enforcement body to have the legislative police that can be there to police the legislative, they have jurisdiction on the legislative ground. So there are various components of various agencies can have law enforcement based on their objectives and the basis for which they were funded.
And what should the training of a law enforcement officer be?
I mean, you should first of all be able to go to an academy to be able to learn the laws of the agency for which you are working, and learn the laws of the country you are in, the criminal laws of the country, the various department policy of the agency, the specific agency you are dealing with, the general orders, and also you have to go through a background check, psychological evaluation. You go through physical regimens, sit up, push ups, and everything. You go through the rigors of the academy. You have a clean record. You ensure that you have a good driving record. And when you go into the academy, you go into driver training. You go into a firearm training. You go through defensive tactics training and all these different training. After you shall have completed this training, then you take you are sworn that you take the oath now to graduate to become a law enforcement officer. So now you have the law enforcement power. You have the power now to enforce law based on the jurisdiction of the agency for which you are being sworn to enforce the law.
In Liberia, where does this fall? Is it the Justice Ministry?
Yes, law enforcement is under the Justice Ministry of Justice. Police is under the Ministry of Justice, the Liberian National Police, and every other jurisdictional police are under the control of the Ministry of Justice. Now, when you look at the entire police, because Liberia is a unitary state, it does not mean that other people, other counties, jurisdiction, other areas cannot have their police. And we see in a typical example, Prince City has its own police force. The police force in Prince City have their jurisdiction within the boundaries of Prince City, the lands of within Prince City, as opposed to going beyond Monrovia. You know, Prince City Police is right in Prince City. Monroe City Police is right in Monrovia. You have maybe Barnaby has a police force. Barnaby Police will have jurisdiction in Barnaby. So every area can have its own police. Kakata can have its own police force if the Kakata local government feel they need to have their own police force, and the LMP officers are not responsive enough to their needs. They themselves can be able to form their own police force in accordance with the requirement put forth by the Justice Ministry and in accordance with the laws of Liberia.
The army is not for law enforcement, is it?
No, the army is not law enforcement. The army is different. It's deal with the army, specifically the military issue. Is that military already have the military corps of justice and all that. The army does not deal with law enforcement in the way as police does.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing law enforcement in Liberia. My guest, Mr. Alfred J. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, what's the state of law enforcement in Liberia currently? You follow these things.
So when it comes to Liberia, over the time, OMIL has done extremely well. When OMIL was there, they did extremely well. From when we compared policing pre-war and policing post-conflict Liberia, we have seen significant improvement. And the improvement is reflected in the fact that since OMIL left, the Liberian National Police has been able to control or deal with protesters in ways that reflect some sort of progress. You know, some level of discipline, some level of professionalism that is reflective of the training OMIL gives them. However, there are still challenges within law enforcement in Liberia that has to be considered. We still have officers taking bribes. We still have officers engaging in criminal activities not consistent with the interests of the Liberian National Police. We also have officers engaging with criminals. So the state of law enforcement in Liberia is still dismal. Even though their progress has been made, they can still make significant changes. They can still make progress. Now, when it comes to manpower in the first place, manpower in Liberia, currently, according to the OMIL report, the current manpower, the Liberian National Police needs 2 times the current manpower they have in order for them to be able to police the entire Liberia. In order for LMP to police Liberia, they need 2 times the law enforcement, the manpower they have. They have approximately 4,800 officers. They need close to 10,000 officers to be able to police for the breadth and length of Liberia. So that's one issue, manpower. When it comes to logistics, law enforcement, Liberian National Police does not have the necessary logistics to be able to enforce the law. We saw that on display when it came to major crime scene messed up. The murder, the suspicious death of the two auditors, the death of the guy from his who allegedly fell from his building, and all these other investigations have been botched by LMP because of the lack of resources and their inability to be able to apply the training they gain from these various government, various international organizations that came to train them. So the state of law enforcement, why the street has improved, is
Right. If you can put your phone on do not disturb, then that will help. Else, as they call in, you will have problem. So when not what we call normal days, police people never have guns, right? Or they have just these little pistols and batons. Now they have guns. What weapons should law enforcement have?
I mean, in Liberia, when it comes to law enforcement in Liberia, as it relates to the use of guns, I think it's necessary for police officers who are in specialty units, who are much more trained who are on the operational aspect of law enforcement to have guns. PSU, ESU, and all these guys, it's necessary for them to have guns because these guys are dealing directly with criminals. But when it comes to patrol, I think if patrol, what they can do is to be able to do an incremental engagement when it comes to giving patrol officers guns. But what the first thing LMP needs to do is to equip these officers with things other than guns. Like as necessary, the right as baton, the pepper spray, the taser, and all these things that can be able to make them look professional. Yeah. Because even the man has a gun, if the man does not look professional, people will take that gun for that man. Their appearance matters. So LMP officers need to first work on their appearance before they can even try to get guns. But I think at some point we should be able to provide them with guns, but in a very measured way, given the history of Liberia. I don't have a problem with officers getting guns. I just feel it should be measured. It should be very careful, and it should study it to the extent that how it impacts the public and how the public themselves going to react to an officer passing around with a gun on his side.
And what kind of gun should that be? Assault rifles or?
No, pistols. Pistol regular, maybe 45 or 30 or 39 or whatever it is, but they shouldn't have AK-47 or the 9. Officers in specialty units need to have that because even on the department, we have officers in specialty units that carry rifle. Even on patrol, there are officers who are trained to carry rifle on our department. They have the rifle in the trunk, but they have the regular guns with them. They're regular 45 or 39, whatever it is they have. They're supposed to have. They have it with them. But to have long guns on the street visibly on a regular patrol, no. The regular pistol gun, that's good, but having long gun is not appropriate at this point.
When it comes to mental health, drug use, and those kind of substance abuse, I don't know what's the level of training, because sometimes we see on social media they get some of the addicts line up and they are tied up and they're being treated like common criminals sometimes. How is the police when it comes to dealing with these kind of mental issues sometimes, or substance abuse, etc.?
You see, like I said earlier, the criminal justice system has various components. They have law enforcement, they have prosecution, they have the courts, and they have corrections. The court system is partly responsible for that because what they do, I give you the example, in the county I work, the court system here has various diversion programs, and they deal with individuals on different levels. So if a person, a drug addict, is on the street and the person is threatening suicide or things like that, we deal with them in a mental health capacity. So we will call EPS. As a matter of fact, we just had the same thing last night. Even though the subject had guns and all that, instead of taking him to the criminal court, we EPS him where he will go to the mental health court. But because there is no mental health court in Liberia, so every individual is treated as a criminal. And some of these things are not necessarily criminal behavior or born as a result of somebody engaging their faculty in the right way. It's as a result of the use of drugs and all these different substances that alters people's mental state. Now, I'm not saying it's a justification for engaging in criminal activity, but I also want you to understand that as law enforcement officers, we are trained to deal with these issues as they are in a criminal manner. But if the court system is there, it provides the opportunity for people to have diversion programs that deal with mental health in a way that is within the court system. Then police in Liberia will be able to deal with it like that. But at this point, we can't blame police in Liberia for that. The only way we can say, the only thing police officers have going for them in Liberia at this point is their own discretion to deal with a person on an individual basis. But as far as police officers taking the responsibility of saying we deal with this person in a mental health way, it's not possible because there is nothing at the court level, at the punitive level, which is the court that has that punitive measure to do it in a mental health form. The court will do it in a criminal form. So why should the officer handle the man as a mental health person when he goes to the court, he will be dealt with as a criminal? So until we can have a mental health system in Liberia that is incorporated in the court system, the officers have no option but to either deal with the person from a mental as a criminal or exercise their individual discretion.
And do our officers have that training?
I understand there are officers that may have those training. I think one of the things LMP, the Tornbill did for LMP was to give them various training, but one of the training to focus on was not necessarily mental health, was dealing with women and children protection. I think like 210 officers or so are trained in that area to deal with women and children issues. But when it comes to mental health, I'm not that informed. I don't know much about if LMP has that mental health training. I don't think that I've done. From all this research I've done, almost all of the training has been HV, sexual and gender-based violence, rape, and all these things, but it has little to do with mental health.
Do you know the presence or the size of police officer or law enforcement officers outside Monserrado County? Like I read a story from Grand Crew where the entire place just one police officer, and this officer have to leave one town to the other. Do we have an accurate number of how many police officers are in the various counties?
According to one research, the amount of officers, I think was somewhere in the southeast, below 5. The total number of officers in those counties was almost 75% less than what is needed in the county to police the county. So if they have 25 officers, they need 100 officers to police that area, but only 25 officers there. So we may not have a specific amount, but from the research, the amount of officers in these various areas are not consistent. The amount is not consistent with the number that is needed to police these areas. So you have a scarcity of officers where one officer is in this area. Before you go, you have to go 25, 30 miles to see another officer.
And that leads us to some of the issues that we want to discuss as our case study, right? Because if you have less officers somewhere, then that means the people have to improvise, right? So you have issues like Sasewu, Country Devil, and all these things, all these people participating or acting to enforce the law. And that leads us to the incident that we want to talk about, which is Election Day incident in Bapolo involving Country Devil. As I learned, there was a total breakdown. There was no police. And so the Country Devil took over to bring calm. I don't know the exact story, but that's what was reported. And to do that, they took away the ballot boxes until the calm can return. So from a law enforcement standpoint, let's do some analysis on this incident involving, I don't know if you know more than I do, involving the incident in Opa with the Country Devil.
So when it comes to that incident, the first thing is we are not going to excuse that action because we say, oh, there are not many law enforcement officers in Liberia. There are specific instances, incidents that require that you have law enforcement presence. Election is one of them. Election is a critical component of national security. It's a critical component of the rule of law. It's a critical component of democracy. So in order for that to go smoothly, you need to have officers at every area that will be able to help enforce the law, ensure that everything goes smoothly. So the lack of officers there cannot be attributed. We cannot say because of the number of officers in Liberia, and also that's why we didn't have officers there. Because the necessary arrangement would have been made for LNP officers to be transported to the area to be able to protect the ballot box, because that's election. That's not the political. It's not like a political gathering or a country club thing. It's election, a critical portion of national reconstruction and renewal. So not having police officers there is not a matter of the amount of officers in the country. It's just a lack of communication between LMP and the National Election Commission. And because of the lack of officers, the traditional leaders felt the need now to step in and provide the necessary security or the necessary control that LMP who are provided if they were there. But the lack of LMP officers created a vacuum that the country devil had to fill. So in as much as we want to frown on the actions of the country devil, we should also understand and say when you're telling the cat not to eat the fish, you should also tell the fish not to smell. The country devil's action is as a result of the lack of law enforcement officers there to control a situation. So as a respected portion of tradition in the county, the country devil stepped in to take control of the situation. Now, how did they control the situation? The manner in which they control it is questionable, but they were stepping in because the Liberian National Police, NEC, also refused to be able to work with Liberian National Police to provide the necessary security for election workers in that area.
So in general, how is law enforcement done in the face of our traditional practices, our traditional laws, or the ways we normally handle business, in areas where the presence of law enforcement is not adequate? Take for instance, and I'll give you more examples like the Sasebo rule. Okay, if there's a crime being committed, maybe somebody has stolen, there's no way you don't have a detective like you, right? So we employ other methods like Sasebo. If the issue is out of hand, the country devil like in Bapolo step in. So how does law enforcement deal with those kind of situations?
So, Dennis, we have to be able to separate criminal activity from tradition. There's a balancing here. There are certain things in America police officers don't get involved in unless it becomes criminal. There are certain things that has to do with social work. There are certain things that has to do with internal affairs issue. Now, if it enters the criminal realm, if it enters the criminal realm, then law enforcement officers can step in to be able to take the necessary action. So, Sasebo things, it's a matter of tradition. Now, I'm not supportive of that, but I also understand that that's something. If there is a criminal component of that, if we feel Sasebo, if there's an investigation that says Sasebo is criminal, that is not proven to be wrong, that the actions of individuals in the Sasebo situation is such that it is manipulated to be able to make somebody look bad, then it becomes a criminal matter because it has the potential of killing somebody. It has the potential of hurting people. So then we step in now and make it a criminal investigation. But in order for that to happen, we must be able to establish some sort of probable cause to some sort of reasonable suspicion to say criminal activity is afoot, and investigation is needed to ascertain if criminal activity is afoot or not. But until that can happen, we have to separate tradition, what we think is tradition, from what law enforcement is supposed to be.
So we're still in Bapolo, and police arrive at the scene. The country devil has a ballot box. What do you do?
I'm sorry, you said what?
I said we're still in Bapolo. The police officer arrive at the scene. The country devil has the ballot boxes. What do you do?
Okay, police officer around the scene, country devil has the ballot boxes. That's a law enforcement matter. That's a law enforcement matter now. So what law enforcement officer has to do now is take control of the scene. Take control of the scene. You understand it? Take control of the scene.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, keep tuned with us. We'll take a short break and be right back.
This is me.
Hi, I'm Bess Garlow.
Hi, I'm Nesta Vicencio.
Wow, Michael Gilman.
My name is Emily Lakakuyu.
Guys, my name is Jacinth Hedlund.
My name is Yacindy Martin.
I'm Octavius Salperi.
Manuel Salas.
My name is Wayne Yoder.
Hi, this is Bill Rogers.
Well, hello, welcome. I'm D. Curtis. You're watching This Is Me. This Is Me is a new show that is all about me. No, not really. It's all about you. But the name of the show is This Is Me. So I can't say this is you, even though the show is all about you. So that's why it's about me. Nah, not really me. This whole thing is getting confusing. Can you just repeat after me? Say, this is me.
This
It's me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
There you go. You got it. This Is Me is a show that gave personalities the unique opportunity to tell their own stories right here on This Is Me. What better person to tell your story than me? No, I mean you on This Is Me.
Thank you. Welcome back to Focus on Liberia. My guest is Mr. Alfred Johnson, and we are discussing law enforcement in Liberia. So, Mr. Johnson, let's go to another incident.
Okay.
And this incident has to do with a reported suicide of EPS officer during the president's nationwide tour. What have you gathered concerning this incident? Because EPS officers are law enforcement officers. So when we have this kind of activity going on among law enforcement, what's the story?
So from what I've gathered so far, this individual was one of the people after the restructuring of the EPS. He was one of the individuals that was allowed to form part of the new protective detail of the President of the Republic of Liberia. But he's been having, from the story, he's been having some mental health issues. There was an incident he had with involving him carrying a gun close to the president, then Ellen Johnson's president. Ellen Johnson said he was stopped in his tracks, and they one that happened on that led to his suicide. From what I understand, they said he was having some sort of mental health episode, and he shot 2 times in the air. And the 3rd time was when he shot himself in the head, because according to the initial report, they said he shot himself 3 times in the head. And that's when I said, no, that's not possible. You know, nobody can shoot himself 3 times in the head. That's just not possible. But from the further investigation revealed that he did shoot himself once in the head. One shot went to the head. He shot twice in the air, and one shot went when he shot the last time he shot was in the head, and that's when he died. That's the shot that killed him. I listened to an audio purportedly of him, and when I listened to it, people were saying, "Oh, that's evidence of him being murdered and things like that." And I said, "No, if that was him, that shows that he was having a serious mental health episode." Because he said, "Oh, they after me, oh, they coming for me, oh, they right here," you know. And he's on the phone. He's on the phone talking, and he said, "Oh, people coming for him." So if somebody's coming for, he said, as a matter of fact, yeah, you know, they're beating me and all that, but yeah, he's on the phone. So that's somebody having some sort of mental health episode. If that was him, but from the story I gathered, he shot himself once in the head, and he shot 2 times in the head, and he shot himself once in the head, and that's what led to his death. But again, it goes to a larger issue when it comes to the process by which individuals become law enforcement officers in Liberia, whether be a police, be it EPS, be it officer of the court, or whatever law enforcement organization in Liberia. And that issue is the entire application process. You have to go through the MMPR, the psychological evaluation. You have to make sure your background is clean. You have to have no criminal record, no mental health issues, clean driving record, and things like that. But in Liberia, it seems like the process is so lax. It's structured in a way where the entire screening mechanism is only theoretical, not practical. They don't believe in the screening mechanism. So individuals like these are forming part of the body, and then they are causing more problem, and it's difficult for the government. And then we have the government that is not good at information dissemination, and you have the public now getting scared because people are saying the guy was killed and all that. So it just goes to a larger issue of the lack of information dissemination and the entire hiring process of law enforcement organizations in Liberia. But from my investigation, I don't think he was murdered. I think it was suicide, and I think it's as a result of some mental health issue he's been having for a long time.
In this case, how will law enforcement investigate this incident to actually establish the truth?
To establish the truth, well, first of all, we have to see who has investigative jurisdiction. And in this case, since he's an EPS officer and he was on the president's detail at the time of his suicide, EPS has primary jurisdiction when it comes to investigation. Maybe EPS can be assisted by LMP if LMP has specific resources that can investigate, that can help investigate. But what it would do is they would try to, first of all, people their communication, his cell phone communication. They would check who he been talking to, who are the last few people he called. They will call these people in and have conversation with them. What did he say? What was the conversation he had? They would check his details, check with his supervisor. What was his assignment? What was he assigned? Did he report to work? They would talk with his co-workers. What was his issue? What was his mental state like? Did he have any issue? Because now we're saying it's suicide. People commit suicide for various reasons: family issues, wife left them, kid died, maybe they have been charged for sexual assault, and all these different things. So they will have a comprehensive investigation, includes his communication, his co-workers. They will interview his co-workers. We will go through his personnel file, if he has one, and see what was he disciplined for, or what were some of the issues he had. Did he seek counseling? These different things, because these things the investigation has to be comprehensive to come up with a conclusion that is consistent with the facts, as opposed to a conclusion that suits a particular interest. So it would take a lot of things. It would take a lot of record checks. It would take a lot of investigation, a lot of interviews for us to be able to come up with the facts. But investigation has to be comprehensive. Now, what EPS can do, they can say, well, since this is our guy, and we want to be as independent as we can, and this investigation, we don't want to tint it, we can turn it over to LMP. LMP conduct the investigation. If LMP is equipped to conduct the investigation, so that there can be no sense of partiality there. So it can reflect some level of objectivity and credibility with the investigative findings.
So for transparency purpose, what exactly you were saying the EPS can divide like the LMP?
Yes.
Is that likely to happen, you think?
But the thing is the LMP equipped enough to conduct that investigation? Do they have the necessary resources needed to conduct the investigation? The EPS can look at it and say, well, LMP, maybe we can, maybe LMP does not have the resources, we can set up an independent investigative body that comprises of officers from different jurisdictions, or top brass, former police directors and things like that, to conduct the investigation if people feel there was some sort of foul play involved. But if LMP does not have the resources to investigate it, then EPS says, well, we just do our investigation and hire experts who are independent enough to be able to provide the necessary independent analysis that will make our investigation credible and authentic.
Right. And a few things that can be checked, tell me if I'm wrong or right. Let's say the story that you just said, it could be that he shot himself in the head, right, once. So if we determine that he has multiple bullet wounds, will it be something else that is happening here? Because it should be just in the head. And then the next one is the gun that was used, right? If that is his own gun, are we equipped enough to really tell the shot to the head which gun it came from, and use that as a form of investigation?
Yeah, so the ballistic evidence, that's why you're talking about the gun. The gun, you can look at a bullet, you can retrieve the bullet from his head if it is retrievable, and do a test firing and see if the bullet from the test fire matches the bullet from the hair, and see if it comes from the same gun. This is a ballistic testing. You have the ability to check for gunpowder residue, GSR, gunpowder residue, to see how close it was to his hands and all that, whether it's on his hands and things like that. And you have the ability to call experts and see if it was staged. If the suicide was staged and there was a murder that was staged to appear like a suicide. So you have the ability to do all that. But whether EPS or LMP has those resources to come up with a conclusion is another thing. But they have the ability to use they check the gun. You can check the gun. The gun, it can tell you if the person actually, the gun the bullet that was shot that killed him, if it came from that gun, it came from another gun. Now, if the man shot himself, he had multiple times, it raises serious suspicion, because if somebody's committing suicide, they know how to commit suicide. They know they got to shoot their head. So if the man has a shot to his stomach, and before he shot to the head, it raises suspicion. If he have bruises, if he have defensive wounds, they check his body for wounds. Was he in a fight with somebody before he got shot and it was staged as a suicide? So they will check his entire body to see if he has any wounds, and whether these wounds are defensive or whether they were self-inflicted. So there are different ways they can go to come up with a comprehensive investigation that that will tell us exactly what happened.
Thank you. Let's lead us to our next issue, which is all the time we hear about rape cases, or and other forms of sexual gender-based violence against mainly women and children. Okay, and there have been multiple arrests, but sometimes we don't know what happened next. What do you know concerning the investigation for SGBV cases? What the arrests have been, what court they're going to, who's doing the arrest, are they equipped, what is being determined from these arrests, and and all the 9 yards. What do you know?
So let's first understand that the ability to arrest is based on the level of proof that we call probable cause. The ability to convict is based on the level of proof that we call beyond a reasonable doubt. So the level of proof for arrest is 51. The level of proof for conviction is all the way up at 95, 96% certainty. In Liberia, the court system was able to set up what we call the Criminal Code E, specifically intended for rape cases. Now, when these guys get arrested, in theory, you expect them to be placed in jail, and then they go for a preliminary hearing. When they go for a preliminary hearing, they read the charges and they plead guilty, whether they are guilty or not, and they prepare for trial. But these things in Liberia don't work like that. The system in Liberia is structured in a way where people deal with situation family way. So a girl gets allegedly raped by the uncle or the father. They arrest the person. After that person, before we know it, the whole case dies because the family decided to deal with it the family way, and they blame the victim. That's one way the issue gets thrown out of the court. They blame the victim. Another way is the fact that because of the backlog of cases, because of the backlog, the lack of real investigation, let's go with the backlog. Because of the backlog, it's difficult for these cases to come forth, and the victims get tired. Because you don't want re-victimization. You have to, victims want to move on with their life. They want to deal with these cases and then move on their life. So if the case continues like that, the victim will feel like, I'm not going to stay with this guy. I have to move on my life. Because they are afraid of re-victimization, they are afraid of retaliation. Another issue is the fact that the system is structured in a way where if you go through the entire court process, corruption seeps in. And if the person knows somebody, that whole court process is just a charade, because at the end of the day, that person will not be found guilty. So there are a multitude of factors. And then the investigation itself, again, going back to LMP officers may not be equipped to conduct the necessary investigation, to have the necessary interviews. Because when it comes to rape is a serious crime. It's not just physically draining, it's emotionally draining also. It's emotionally damaging. So in order to investigate a rape victim, there are strategies you have to employ. LMP officers are not equipped to employ these strategies to interview rape victims. The gathering of evidence in a rape case is another thing too. If a person gets raped, you get a rape kit. You take the person to the hospital, they conduct full investigation and assess the person's entire body to see for forced penetration and all the different things. And all these findings are placed in a rape kit. And they go from there. But these things are not like that in Liberia. So because of these difficulties and because of the backlog in the system, it's difficult for you to prosecute rape cases in Liberia.
And what has been, I think I'm getting a feedback. What has been the trend with the LMP, right? Because sometimes even law enforcement officers dismiss those cases and say, oh, move from there, man. Big girl like you that you will rape. Those kind of things. What is the so sometimes law enforcement officers themselves become the problem. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes. There are instances where police officers themselves dismiss these victims, and they are not even supportive of the victims enough to be able to say, oh, we understand the case, and be able to conduct the interview in a fair manner. As soon as the victim goes to the police station, police dismiss them. Big girl, you can get raped, man. You wanted it. You like it. Now, if a victim who goes to the police to seek redress is being addressed in such a manner, you don't expect that victim to go any further with the case. she would just decide, you know what, I'm just going to let it be and move on. That's why you have so many young Liberian girls who have stories of rape, stories of being raped, because of how police officers have treated them, because of how their issues have been approached. Yeah, we take victims by their word. We don't say the victim is lying or not, because there may be a couple of cases where the victim may be lying, but most of the time the victim is saying the truth. And if you have a system where people dismiss the victim outrightly, where the victim is already behind the curveball, if she has to convince you that it happened, before she has to convince the court, then she'd be like, I'm not even going through this process anymore. I'm just going to stay here and let it be. So as officers, it is the responsibility of police officers to accept victim stories. Yeah, you can be very kind of low taxed to be able to find the details, where it happened, how it happened, what was said, because that you have to understand also, in order to establish the crime, there are different components. There are different components, elements of the crime that have to be established in order for the crime to be for it to be considered a crime. So these officers need to ask these questions, these specific questions, to be able to establish the very elements of the crime of rape, the very elements of the crime of sexual assault, so that they can be able to charge them accordingly. Because when you take these documents to the court, the court will look at these different elements and make sure that they are there before they can give charges. Those questions need to be asked. But if officers are dismissive, they will have an uncooperative victim.
So what do we need in all this so that victims of rape can have their fair share of justice?
You beyond having a strong court system, you need a trained body of law enforcement officer that will see victim as victim, and not as people deserving to be raped. You also need a vibrant civil society group. Yeah, you have different, they got a house of Mary, they got a house, the other person, the other group, they have programs, they have resources available to victims of rape. So when these victims are being raped, the victim decides to cooperate. She comes to the court, the police explains her story to the police, charges are leveled against the suspect. The victim has to go to court. But the victim, you have to understand, when this victim is charged, the suspect is charged, this suspect is the breadwinner in the family in Liberia. The man is charged. The people don't like the victim. So you have to have organizations that can support the victim throughout the court process. Mm-hmm. But if the victim does not have this support system, they will say, no, I'm not going through it because I have my family member, they have ostracized me. I have to have something, I have to find somewhere to be. I have to be able to find ways to eat. I have to go to school if the victim is staying in school. And all these things weigh heavily on their mind when they decide to bring charges against, or they decide to come and say they were raped by their uncle, by their father, by their brother, and all these things. These things weigh heavily on their mind. They should have a body that will be able to help them to be able to deal with the process. Also have a court system that will be able to say, yes, we can give you redress. So if the victim comes to the court, she cannot say the court is not going to give her redress. You have to have a police that is trained enough to not dismiss victims, but to accept the victims and ask the necessary question that will be able to either establish that a rape happened or that rape did not happen.
And how far are we to reaching that point?
We are very very far. We are not close there because I've been going Liberia regularly. I have seen how rape victims are dealt with. I've seen LMP officers, some of the conversations we've had, how they think of the victims and how they think of it in terms of the patriarchal nature of Liberian society. So we are far. We are very, very far. We are far in terms of police investigation. It's not there. In terms of the court's ability to prosecute these perpetrators, it's not there. In terms of having a support system for the victims so that they can go through the court process without being ostracized from their family, it's not there. We need resources for the victim. It's not there. None of these things are there. We don't have, if we have like they at a very bare minimum level, that makes it difficult for you to say you have any sort of structure that can benefit these victims of rape and other sexual and gender-based violence in Liberia.
At Focus on Liberia, we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. In this edition, we are discussing law enforcement in Liberia. My guest is Mr. Alfred J. Johnson. He's a law enforcement officer and criminal justice practitioner based in Maryland, USA. Mr. Johnson, let's look at one other issue. That's this, we can call it border security. We can call it, someone who has some problem with the law, and then that person escaped. I have two examples. One, a couple of years ago, we had Madam Ellen Cochran, who was at the RIA, and there was some trouble according to the multiple recordings they put forward, they were doing some underground investigation to unearth corruption, and people were after them. And so they escaped out of the country. The government declared them as fugitives, running away from justice. But how did they escape? Who helped them? We don't know. Second, we have the issue involving Henry Pedro Custer, the leader of COP, or radio talk show host, who was having some problem with the law, and he also escaped via Sierra Leone. How these things happening? So that's why I say I call this the underground escape routes. Oh, sorry, I have you. Go ahead. These underground escape routes, where are they? Who is facilitating them? What is the role of the of law enforcement in either stopping this kind of thing? Because the issue may be like, maybe we think it's politically driven, but what if we have some actual criminal, some real hardened criminals that commit some heinous crimes and they will escape? So what is the role of law enforcement in stopping this kind of escape, or in making sure that justice is served?
So what you are talking about now has to do with border security, and that has to do with immigration and custom enforcement. So I was reading the Henry Custer's narrative when he was speaking in America after he managed to arrive in the States via Sierra Leone. I was reading it, and he was giving a narrative that shows me either the Liberian government were not serious to get Henry Custer, or the security nature of the country is so bad that Henry Custer could have easily left Liberia like that. So Henry Custer said he passed 3 different checkpoints and they waved him. They just waved him, and he said the guys waved to him, and he just left fast. So when he got to the border, he got there around 12:35 in the night, and he took Kingdom to go through and got to Sierra Leone and all that. But my thing is, the ability of these individuals to escape or to evade law enforcement is as a result of the lack of adequate law enforcement, or the fact that corruption play a role too, or the fact that people don't understand their oath as law enforcement officers. They refuse to understand that as police officers, as immigration officers, you have a responsibility to the state. You have a responsibility to enforce laws of Liberia, and not to seek and not to enforce the law in a partial manner. You arrest this person, but you don't arrest this person. You fully inspect this car, but you don't fully inspect this other car. You check this person's immigration paper, but you don't check the other person's immigration paper. You get laissez passer for this person without them being present, but you request that the other person be present to provide laissez passer. So Henry Custer's departure from Liberia, Ellen Conqueror's ability to leave Liberia, so with such level of ease, it just shows that law enforcement in Liberia is not there yet. You know, if the government was actually, either show the government was not interested really in Henry Custer, it was just for show, or that law enforcement is extremely lax, that anybody can just evade law enforcement, in this case, the custom and border, and just get out of Liberia with such an ease. Ellen Conqueror, I think she flew out of Liberia, if I'm not mistaken. I think she flew out of Liberia.
Yeah, we don't know how she escaped.
So we don't know how she escaped in Liberia, but if she was wanted by the government of Liberia, and she escaped. She made it to America. Henry Custer was wanted by the government of Liberia. He escaped. He made it to Sierra Leone and eventually America. So these things are just testament of the fact that policing Liberia, immigration law enforcement in Liberia is not there yet. And we go back to the point I'm saying, it's not there yet. And as it's a sad situation. It's something that we all have to be very, very concerned about, because we cannot say we want to have a lawful society and we have these kind of incidents going on. If a popular man, Henry Custer, can leave the country with such ease, then what may you think the guy who killed his daughter in Logantown can leave with ease? Because nobody knows him. Before you find out who the guy is, he's already in Sierra Leone. So we have a responsibility to be able to protect our borders.
Right. Another way to look at it, could it be that because there are some law enforcement officers who do not want to enforce laws that are all corrupt laws, bad laws, right? So, for instance, they look at Henry Custer as hero, and they feel that the government is after him for the wrong reason, so they're going to let him pass. Or in the case of Ellen Cochran, who allegedly was investigated and unearthing corruption in government, and so they look at her as someone who was doing something good, and so they let her pass. Could that be the case?
That could be the case, but we also have to understand, we have to first establish that what are the laws that were being enforced, that are being actually, the laws that are being actually being enforced are wrong, are bylaws. You know, that's the first thing. Was the government request for Henry Custer it was not consistent with the rule of law or the laws of Liberia or anything was not consistent with that? I mean, Eileen Conkron, she may have been investigating something and the government of Liberia wanted to arrest her for whatever it is. Was the arrest intended to discredit her investigation, or was it intended to say, oh yeah, she was involved in this and we're trying to arrest her because her own investigation unearthed this and that? Now, it's one thing if my supervisor tells me to arrest somebody without probable cause, I'm not going to execute that arrest. Because I'll tell you, listen, sir, I don't make it very clear on my report that the supervisor told me to do X, Y, Z. On my report, I didn't make the arrest out of my own. I read my report and my supervisor told me to do this. But it is a slippery slope if we say people can enforce the law based on their interpretation of it. It is a very slippery slope. I understand that Henry Costa is a hero for a lot of people. Ellen Carter may be a hero for a lot of people, but we need to have a country of law. And in as much as you may not like the law, that's why it is your responsibility as citizens to challenge the law at the level of the Supreme Court. We see it right in America here. Most of the laws, most of the criminal laws, most of the procedural laws when it comes to the dispensation of justice in America was as a result of citizens themselves challenging their convictions, their sentencing, the evidence gathered. They challenge those things at the level of the Supreme Court, and that's what gave birth to the Miranda reading. Now they have to read your rights, your Miranda rights. That's what gave birth to people having public defenders, gave birth to the defender office, gave birth to the exclusionary rule, because citizens challenge these laws in the court. Now we may say Liberian court system is corrupt, but how is it going to be uncorrupted if we are just going to join? Are we going to just join in the corrupt system, or we are going to say, you know what? In as much as I don't agree with this law, it is the law of the land. The law has to be enforced. Now, if Henry Costa feels like his life is in jeopardy and things like that, people can have the ability to do what they want to do, but I don't think it is the place of a law enforcement officer to engage in that action, because that's corrupt. That is against his or her oath of office that he took to protect the land of Liberia. If a law enforcement officer was involved in that, they should be charged in accordance with the laws of Liberia, in accordance with their department's general order. I mean, I understand people trying to say, oh, they may have this one going, the other one going. I understand that. But we also have a responsibility to know that, I mean, I agree with something, but it is what it is at that point, and I have to respect it at that point.
So in other words, what you're saying is, if a law enforcement officer was told to arrest Henry Costa, and that law enforcement officer thought that arresting Mr. Costa was unjust, and so instead of arresting, he actually helped him escape to Sierra Leone. You saying that is wrong, and that person needs to face justice?
Yeah, because what will happen now is that law enforcement officer now, the government, like I said again, the level of proof needed for conviction is higher than the level of proof needed for arrest. Arrest, you need to have probable cause. So if the government library went to a court and the court granted them warrant to say, yes, you have enough probable cause to arrest this guy, it is the court that issued that warrant. You may disagree with the court, but the court warrant has to be enforced. And then Henry Costa can go to the law to defend himself. Now, his security, his personal security is of concern to him. And I respect that, because we've had so many mysterious deaths in Liberia, and his personal security is of significant concern to him too. And that's something that will concern me. But the law is there. If the court decides that the law has to be enforced, the man violated the law, you have to arrest the man. Now, if you decide to help Henry Costa escape the country, you are aiding and embedding a fugitive. That's criminal. So you yourself now, law enforcement officer, if you are found to have done that, you could be charged. So in a normal society, that wouldn't happen. But again, in Liberia, it's a different situation. So in as much as we want to talk about the rule of law to prevail in Liberia, we also have to understand that people's life is at risk and things like that. And Henry Costa himself has legitimate concern when it comes to his safety, because we know what happens in Liberia. But as a law enforcement officer, I wouldn't engage in that kind of action. I wouldn't assist a fugitive to escape justice, because I don't know how it's going to come back on me.
Right. And you may not know where to draw the line. Because if that is based on your interpretation or your own discretion, it's a slippery slope.
Hey, that's the point. That's the point right there. So we have, as law enforcement officers, one thing we have is distraction. Law enforcement officers have a lot of distraction. A law enforcement officer can stop you and either give you a ticket or give you a warning. But where the law is explicit in its understanding, its interpretation, we cannot do anything. If the law says if the court has a warrant for this arrest, that means the court has established that the government has provided no probable cause for him to be arrested. So I cannot look at the warrant and say I'm going to disregard the warrant because I don't agree with the court's interpretation of the elements of the crime. I don't agree that they have the meat of the evidence, enough evidence to be able to have probable. I don't agree that they have probable cause to arrest him. The court agrees. Who am I to disagree with the court?
Thank you. Let's bring in our viewers with their comments. And the first comment here, since we are on the Henry Custer issue, comes from Beto Nimo. It reads, Liberia is a country of killers. Henry Custer would have been dead today had he not escaped. What's your take?
I mean, I'm not going to already say that's not true. I'm not going to say it's true either, but because the history of Liberia is loaded with examples of individuals being killed or dying under suspicious circumstances, and their death has just gone under the radar eventually without anybody being held accountable. So I'm not going to entirely disagree, but you have to also understand Henry Custer has a significant following in Liberia. And I believe that the people in Liberia Henry Custer has enough people in Liberia to provide the necessary protection for him. I do believe that. I also understand where they're coming from as it relates to his safety. I understand that, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to err on the side of the rule of law.
Judge, to just say, until we can have a radical change in the judiciary branch of the government, there will be no trust in the government. In other words, maybe people can err on the side of their hero instead of the law.
Yeah, they can err on the side of their hero instead of the law, but as somebody sworn to enforce the laws of Liberia. So are you choosing which law to enforce if you're a law enforcement officer? That's like saying it is okay for people to breach the Capitol because I agree with them. I disagree with them, even though I may agree with them, but I actually discriminate, so I'm not going to join them. So if the law says Henry Custer was committed a crime and they have enough reason to charge him, I think Henry Custer can go seek redress through the court system. Henry Custer is a popular figure. Now, anybody could have done something bad to him. That's true. I'm not denying that. I'm also not denying the fact that the system is corrupt. The Liberian justice system is corrupt. But if we're not going to challenge the system, how is it going to? Don't tell me the system cannot be challenged. The late Charles Bromsky challenged the system, and there were major rulings from the Supreme Court on election matters. The system was challenged on major occasions at election level, and it proved strong. So we have to build on what we have. We cannot say because this person is our hero, so we dismiss it. So tomorrow, what he's saying now is tomorrow, the government of Liberia, if Henry Custer people are in power and they charge somebody else, we can interpret and say the person will not charge for it, so the person will run take the person out of the country. Are we going to go through this vicious circle of getting our own out of a situation illegally because we don't feel like their actions or the government is justified in its all actions? We got to be very careful now how we conduct ourselves, because today the rain does not fall on one roof alone. Today is the George Weah government. Tomorrow it could be the Joseph Boakai government that will want maybe a Julius Jair or you.
Zina Doa say, in what instance will you not carry on an arrest? And before you answer that question, there's a second one here from Dave Jar. Does a professional police officer have an obligation to obey unjust and ruthless law? Same question. So your response to those two questions.
What was the first question?
The first question says, in what instances will you not carry on arrest? And then the second question says, Does a professional police officer like you now have an obligation to obey unjust and ruthless laws?
So what constitutes unjust and ruthless law? Because unjust and ruthless law is a matter of opinion. It's a matter of opinion. So if the law is written as it is written, if it is passed, I can exercise discretion. There are times where I decide to charge somebody. I said, no, I'm not going to charge them. There are instances where I feel like, the ASA, I talked to the ASA, I'm like, no, we're not going to put charges on this person. It's not necessarily a matter of the law being unjust and ruthless. It's just a matter of ASA and police officers exercising discretion. So it is not ruthless or unjust. It is a matter of exercising discretion. So there are instances where you're not charge a person. But if they arrest, you can arrest somebody. You have to understand the law. You have to understand that in order to have an orderly society, there are certain things you may do as a matter of expediency. I will arrest the person, but eventually you talk to the ASA, you have a conversation, and you go from there. But if the law is on the book, if that's a law, I can either exercise my discretion and give the person the option of getting a warrant for them or something like that, or arresting them. It's based on the totality of the circumstances, as opposed to me saying because this person is my person and I feel the person who's trying to arrest them is not doing the right thing, so they are my people, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to arrest them because I will be in violation of the law, and I'll be engaged in criminal act, which is wrong.
Henrietta Morgan, the government needs to investigate serious cases like the 4 auditors, the 3 missing men, etc., than going after laissez-passer. What's your take?
Again, that's an issue against a matter of issue. I agree the government needs to investigate. When I spoke in Liberia on the death of the auditors, I told them, the possibility does exist that the death, it was accidental, all the death were accidental. As a matter of fact, the guy who died in a car accident, I made that very clear. That car accident had no criminal intent or whatever. That man was drunk. He got behind the wheel to drive, and he killed himself and another person. It was a case of drunk driving, period. I also said that the 2 people that died in the car up there on Broad Street, it's entirely possible it's carbon monoxide person. It's also entirely possible somebody killed them and staged their death. But the government needs to adequately investigate it. I spoke on that. I said the government needs to adequately investigate it. But we're not going to pick and choose what the government investigates. We're not going to choose because it's Henry Custer and laissez-passer, so the government would consider it to be not a serious issue. But this other one is serious. The issue of laissez-passer is somebody is doing that. We don't know how large that scheme is. So the government needs to investigate. So we don't choose what government investigate based on our interest. If the government must investigate murder, the government also investigate laissez-passer fraud. Because it has to do with national security. Just as we investigate passport fraud.
Good. Jason Carson, can you please repeat your guest CV? Thank you. I think we repeated that. Dave Ja, how is the quasi-autonomy of the police forces advantageous if it is still controlled by a central system? I think when we spoke about law enforcement being all the counties, what does that mean if it's still being controlled by a central system in Monrovia?
So what happens here is you have one of the autonomy you will get is the decentralization of LMP, where you have every county in control of LMP in a way, even though LMP, Liberia is a unitary state, so LMP can be centralized. However, another thing people can do is nobody say counties can have their own police force. LMP can only be responsible for continuing the highway in Kakata. The Mangibi County Police Department, Mangibi can set up their own police department, have a Mangibi County PD, MGPD, where they have primary jurisdiction on crimes happening in Mangibi County. And while LMP controls the highways and makes all the roads in Mangibi County and investigate have primary jurisdiction or certain investigation in certain part of the county, Mangibi County can have their own police force. Nobody says they can't have it. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of having their own police force. Not necessarily under the auspices of LMP, but under the control of the Mangibi County government. Because there are local government, there are county governments. They are just not strong because we are focused on centralized government system.
Let's go back to the EPS worker. Zanga David said, do you know when the mental illness started? Alberta Nemo said, was the incident with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, carrying the gun closer, was it reported? And then why has there never been a news conference about the details of this alleged suicide?
Whether the EPS, whether the first incident was reported, I'm not too sure. But we gather it from the report, from the new incident. People started coming out in news reports that this is what happened before. So news report reported, but when it happened, the very time it happened, I'm not sure whether it was reported or not. And they said something about news press conference. That's another issue I have with the government. The lack of information creates a vacuum where anybody can fill with falsehood. It is the government of Liberia's responsibility to inform the public on these things. The reason why people have issue with believing that this guy committed suicide was because the report said he shot himself 3 times in the head. Only for someone who did follow investigation to find out, no, he didn't shoot himself 3 times in the head. He shot 3 times, but he only shot himself 1 time in the head. But because there is lack of information for the government of Liberia, this vacuum has been created where any information goes there and fills it, and now it's difficult for the people to disabuse themselves of that 3 shot in the head information because nobody else has been given them new information. So I agree with the person why the government of Liberia does not want to disseminate information is wrong.
This one from Karen Kennedy, fellow Liberians, Mervyn Early, I think that was the police officer in central Liberia, was executed because he saw the missing boys or the missing men, and he was about to expose the government. Finda Bono intentionally put him on the trip and executed him herself. Our lives are in danger. I have no idea what they're talking about, but you respond. Oh, sorry, you were on mute. Go ahead.
I mean, that's total speculation. I don't know how the correlation is. That whole Simosi thing is just grounded in some sort of conspiracy theory. I don't want to address because I don't think it's fair for me to address conspiracy theory at this point.
Dave Jazz says, almost every area of endeavor in Liberia is a challenge. Is there hope for Liberia in this age? Does the country fit the profile of a functioning nation?
There is hope for Liberia. We have to, somebody said something one time, and I agree with them. They said no issue Liberia is facing has not been, every problem Liberia is faced with has been faced by other nations and has been solved. So Liberia's situation is not unique. What is unique about Liberia is the lack of leadership. Lack of leadership, lack of the ability of individuals to put national interest above personal interest. So there is still hope for the country. I still believe in a better Liberia. I still believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow when it comes to Liberia. But I'm also aware of the fact that the current group of leaders and the individuals who want to replace, immediate individuals who want to replace those leaders are not the individuals who are going to deliver the country into where it's supposed to put this country where it's supposed to be. But I do believe there is still hope for Liberia.
The guests agreed that the system is corrupt. Now you as a police officer, why will you obey a warrant in corruption system? What made you think that the so-called warrant is corruption free? I think the same question being asked differently. Let me add this one before you respond, because we are almost out of time here. Our number one mistake after 14 years of civil war, why would a Harvard graduate, aka Ellen Clueless, oh God, people ask your question without calling name. Why would Harvard graduate Ellen Johnson close down 2 ministries that were very paramount to our geographical dynamics? We closed planning and rural development until those essential ministries be reinstated. You're joking, and something like that. And
again, I don't want to speak to speculation. I don't want to engage in this kind of insulting thing. So I don't think I want to dignify that.
No, I agree. Anthony Rogers, my dear brother, I appreciate your analysis, fair and balanced. And Are you paying close attention to this guy? He does not seem to be insulting anyone. He seems professional and balanced in his analysis. All right. And last comment here from Cotton Edge Climb. Balanced assertion, my brother. What are your recommendations, especially law enforcement integrity breaches?
Nothing, and this will be my last. This will be my last one because I myself have to get on those detail. I think one thing we have to do is first of all remove politics from law enforcement. The politicization of law enforcement in Liberia has been one of the major hindrances to professionalism. We saw that in the beating of 102. We've seen that in the situation with Yaka Koloba and all these things. So remove politics from law enforcement, and you will have one of the major impediments to having perfect law enforcement in Liberia removed out of the way. Another thing is you have to pay officers. You have to pay officers now, according to a report, police officers' annual salary in the average salary for a police officer in Liberia is $46,000 Liberian dollars, which is less than $200 per month. Which is like around $200 per month. So you have to pay officers ways that are consistent with the cost of living in Liberia. You have to also professionalize the body, about making law enforcement officers to appear professional. You have to also increase the standard, not increase it, but enforce the hiring requirements. Make sure the hiring requirements are enforced. No dictum and hiring should just be able to come and be the police. Nobody should just come up anywhere and be the police. You have to have some standard. You also have to have, at this point, the University of Liberia needs to have a criminal justice department. The nation's premier university has nothing to do with, has no criminal justice department. How do we expect to have professional law enforcement when criminal justice just became a discipline in Liberia in the last, maybe post-war Liberia after 2003, if I'm not mistaken? Criminal justice has not been in Liberia in the 50s in terms of education, as far as it being a course in Liberia. The University of Liberia does not even have a criminal justice department. So you need to incorporate the theory and the practical aspect of law enforcement into law enforcement in order to have a professional body. It's going to take some time, but we need to start it now in order to have a professional body in the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Now your parting statement.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for the opportunity, and I really appreciate the audience for the time they took to be with us. I do hope that I was able to at least give them the necessary information. I hope I was being fair and balanced. And I do look forward to more opportunity for us to discuss law enforcement issues in Liberia. Again, thank you for the opportunity, Dennis.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your time. And until then, we want to say thanks to our audience and even those who are going to watch later. We appreciate all of you. Keep it here at Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Until then, we have a very exciting lineup for you coming throughout the week and the weekend. Please keep your dial set here. Until then, from me to you, we will not leave you until we play our closing song that says, "We are all Liberians." Good night and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home.